What happens when a country spends years building one of the largest missile arsenals in the Middle East and then decides to use it all at once instead of smaller, carefully calibrated strikes seen before? That is exactly the scenario military. Planners on both sides have spent years preparing for in this conflict, and it tests something far more important than any single weapon system. In modern integrated defense strategy, it tests whether an entire integrated defense architecture built over decades can actually perform when it matters. Before we go any further here, if you want to truly understand what is happening around the world, instead of just watching headlines fly past you every single day, hit subscribe right now to follow. This channel breaks down real strategy behind the biggest global power moves happening in today's shifting world order. And this situation might be the clearest test yet of whether modern missile defense technology can truly perform under real combat conditions in today's rapidly evolving and highly complex battlefield environment we are now witnessing. So stay with me, because by the end of this video you will understand something most viewers miss. Something people watching the news tonight are very likely going to completely overlook or misunderstand in the moment. For years, Iran's missile strategy has relied heavily on volume over precision rather than fewer, highly accurate systems. Instead of investing in smaller numbers of advanced, technologically sophisticated missiles, Iran built one of the largest arsenals in the region, focused on sheer numbers, overwhelming even highly capable and advanced modern defense systems. The logic behind this strategy remains simple and straightforward in military terms. Defense systems have limited interception capacity. No matter how advanced any system, it can detect, track, and intercept only within a limited time window. If enough missiles arrive at once, the theory suggests some will inevitably penetrate even the strongest defenses. Regardless of how sophisticated defending systems actually are under real conditions, some threats are expected to get through. This strategy has never been fully tested at true operational scale before in this ongoing regional conflict, because previous exchanges involved smaller limited strikes instead of massive coordinated barrages, stressing integrated defense networks. A large-scale barrage changes the entire equation in a fundamental way. It is not just another exchange. It becomes a real stress test for layered and networked defense architecture built over decades with massive investment by the United States and regional allies to prevent exactly this scenario from successfully overwhelming their defenses. To understand why this matters so much, you need to understand modern integrated air defense systems today, because it is fundamentally different from what most people usually imagine when thinking about missile defense. It is not a single system standing alone watching the sky and firing interceptors at threats. Instead, it is a complex networked architecture combining multiple defense layers, each designed for specific threat ranges, all coordinated together through shared information systems that connect every sensor and interceptor battery seamlessly, allowing everything to function as one unified picture rather than separate isolated defense components. If you are starting to see the complexity behind the simple question of stopping incoming missiles, make sure you are subscribed, because we are just beginning to explore the real mechanics behind this kind of layered defense system under real pressure conditions seen in modern conflict. The next part explains exactly how each layer works together during intense operational scenarios. Let us now talk about what those layers actually look like in real-world practice, because understanding this architecture is essential to knowing what large-scale testing would actually reveal. At the outer edge of this system sit early warning satellites and radar installations, positioned specifically to detect missile launches within seconds of occurrence, tracking trajectory from the earliest stage, providing immediate warning signals to every other part of the defense network for rapid, coordinated response. That early detection window matters enormously because every extra second adds valuable decision-making time for target prioritization, interceptor allocation, and coordination across multiple defense systems working simultaneously together, ensuring different batteries do not wastefully target the same missile while leaving others completely uncovered. The next layer typically involves longer-range interceptor systems, designed to engage ballistic missiles during the mid-course phase of their flight while still traveling through space or upper atmosphere regions well before beginning final descent phase. Intercepting at this stage offers significant advantages, since missiles are more predictable in trajectory and have not yet begun evasive maneuvering or deploying complex decoys used by more sophisticated missile systems during their final approach toward targets. Closer to the actual target location, shorter-range terminal defense systems provide a final protective interception layer, designed to engage missiles that pass earlier defensive layers during final descent closer to ground and intended targets. This layer must operate on extremely compressed timelines, often leaving just seconds between detection and required interception action, which is why coordination and information sharing between defensive layers becomes critically important for successful interception and response timing. A terminal defense system already aware of incoming missiles missed by earlier layers, and roughly where those threats are heading, has a significantly higher chance of successful interception compared to systems operating with delayed or limited information about approaching missile threats. This is where the real strategic question in large-scale barrage scenarios actually exists within modern defense planning. It is not simply about whether a single layer can intercept an incoming missile successfully. Modern systems have already demonstrated this capability repeatedly under test conditions and smaller real engagements. The real question is whether the entire networked defense system can operate effectively under pressure with compressed timelines and massive information overload from dozens or hundreds of simultaneous incoming threats. Can it maintain coordination and decision-making speed required to allocate interceptors efficiently across threats, without wasting resources on redundant intercepts or missing threats entirely due to system overload and confusion? Because sheer volume can overwhelm tracking, classification, and response capabilities of even advanced integrated systems. It is also important to consider historical precedent in these situations. As large-scale exchanges happened before, each case has provided valuable lessons about how defense systems perform under real combat stress, rather than controlled and predictable testing environments used during development and evaluation of these technologies. Previous large-scale barrages have shown high intercept rates for heavily defended high-priority targets, while success rates drop significantly for less protected or lower-priority strategic locations under attack. This reflects the practical reality that even advanced systems must make difficult prioritization decisions, allocating limited interceptor inventory toward the most critical and high-value targets during overwhelming attack scenarios, while accepting increased risk at lower priority locations when volume exceeds total defensive system capacity. This historical pattern explains why military planners invest significant time in target prioritization algorithms and decision support systems designed to allocate interceptors automatically and almost instantly under pressure conditions, because human operators alone cannot make dozens or hundreds of decisions within such compressed operational timelines. The sophistication of these automated systems may matter even more than raw interception capability itself in determining how effectively an integrated defense network performs under large-scale real-world stress. When tested at the kind of scale this scenario actually represents in modern high-intensity conflict, if this kind of deep analysis is what you come here for, tap the like button right now. It genuinely helps this video reach people who want deeper strategy beyond simple headlines. Let us now examine the strategic calculation behind why Iran might launch a large-scale barrage, because understanding motivation matters just as much as technical capability in analyzing real-world decisions. To understand this calculation, you must look at internal power structures shaping Iran's major strategic choices. The system is not a single, unified government making calm, rational decisions from one central authority. It is a fragile balance between groups that depend on each other but lack trust. At the top sits clerical leadership, claiming religious and political authority over the entire system. Beneath them operates the Revolutionary Guard, controlling military forces, missile programs, and large economic sectors. And beneath both are ordinary Iranian citizens absorbing the daily cost of these strategic priorities, millions facing economic pressure from decades of military focus and regional proxy conflicts over welfare. A large-scale missile barrage carries enormous symbolic and strategic internal weight beyond actual physical battlefield impact. For the Revolutionary Guard, such a visible demonstration proves continued relevance, capability, and operational strength, especially during periods of sanctions, economic strain, and prior battlefield losses, pressuring internal regime cohesion. Even if most missiles are successfully intercepted, the visible scale creates a powerful political narrative, one that smaller measured strikes simply cannot replicate or achieve in terms of internal messaging. This creates an important strategic tension worth understanding in depth from both military and political angles. From a purely military standpoint, a largely intercepted barrage may appear to achieve very little. It could even be framed as evidence of limited effectiveness, despite large arsenal size claims. But from an internal political perspective, the demonstration itself still holds critical strategic value. The sheer scale of coordinated launch provides visible proof of continued capability to domestic audiences and reinforces confidence among hardline factions, regardless of actual interception rates achieved militarily. Now, let us examine how defending systems handle this level of complexity during such scenarios. Because the coordination challenge is among the most technically demanding problems in modern warfare. When dozens or hundreds of missiles launch in a short window, sensors must track everything. Every radar and satellite system simultaneously monitors multiple incoming objects across different trajectories. Each trajectory must be calculated individually and fed into shared targeting systems in real time, fast enough for interceptor batteries to decide which threats to engage first under extreme pressure. This is where advanced networked combat systems become strategically very important in modern integrated defense environments. Instead of each defense battery operating in isolation with only local radar, modern systems share tracking information instantly. If one radar detects an incoming missile, that data becomes available to the entire network immediately, allowing coordinated decisions about which battery is best positioned to intercept each specific incoming threat efficiently, preventing multiple batteries from engaging the same target while others remain completely unaddressed during critical moments. This coordinated response becomes exponentially more valuable as the number of simultaneous incoming threats increases rapidly. A small number of missiles over time can be managed even without perfect coordination between defense batteries. But dozens or hundreds arriving together require instantaneous automated coordination across a fully integrated defense network. Because human operators alone cannot process and allocate resources across so many decisions in limited time. There's also an important cost dimension in missile defense versus missile attack, worth understanding clearly. Interceptor missiles often cost significantly more to produce than many offensive missiles they are designed to stop, especially when facing simpler, lower-cost systems used in large-volume barrage strategies by attackers. This cost imbalance means even successful interceptions can still result in significant financial strain overall, for the defending side, compared to what attackers spent launching the barrage in the first place. This economic reality shapes strategic thinking on both sides beyond simple effectiveness. Metrics used in military analysis. A defending country must consider not only interception success, but also sustainability of prolonged defensive expenditure levels over extended conflict periods without depleting interceptor inventories faster than they can realistically be replenished. This is why interceptor stockpiles and production capacity are closely monitored, strategic indicators in conflict. Because intercepting every barrage but exhausting inventory creates a very different long-term strategic position, compared to maintaining a sustainable defensive posture over extended timelines with balanced resource management. If you made it this far, you clearly care about deeper, understanding beyond surface-level coverage. Drop a comment and share which part surprised you most as it shapes future analysis. Now let us examine what an honest assessment of intercept rates would actually look like, because this detail is often oversimplified in dramatic headline coverage from both sides of conflict. No missile defense system has ever achieved perfect 100% interception under real conditions. Even the most advanced systems show documented failure rates during testing and real-world engagements, and those failure rates increase as attack volume and complexity exceed original system design limits. This does not mean missile defense technology is ineffective in real-world large-scale combat scenarios. It means stopping a large barrage rarely involves intercepting every incoming missile without any exception at all. Instead, it usually means intercepting a meaningful majority of dangerous and high-priority incoming threats, while successfully protecting the most critical and highest value strategic targets across the defended region. At the same time, accepting some missiles may still get through to less critical targets, particularly lower priority or less sophisticated threats that are not fully prioritized by the system, or even fail before reaching targets due to reliability or guidance issues within the arsenal. This distinction matters enormously when evaluating how such scenarios should actually be understood and analyzed by both military analysts and the public. Watching unfolding coverage of such major events. A defense system intercepting most genuinely threatening missiles can still be considered highly effective overall, even if a small number of less critical threats get through during intense engagements. Despite headlines focusing on failures simply because some missiles manage to penetrate defenses. Understanding this nuance is essential for interpreting real barrage scenarios accurately without emotional overreaction, rather than reacting to whichever framing creates the most dramatic headline in the moment. Now, let us examine how both sides will publicly frame outcomes of a large-scale barrage scenario, because the gap between public messaging and private technical assessment reveals critical underlying strategic realities. Expect Iranian state media to emphasize the scale and coordination of the missile launch itself, highlighting any missiles reaching targets as proof of continued arsenal effectiveness, while downplaying interception success rates. This messaging supports internal political goals by reassuring domestic audiences and security institutions of strength, maintaining confidence that military capability remains real and undiminished despite actual technical outcomes of exchange, On the American and Allied side, public statements will likely stress overall defensive success rates, focusing on percentage of missiles intercepted and protection of critical high-value strategic targets. While offering limited details about missiles that penetrated defense networks during the engagement, this reflects a familiar communication pattern seen in military messaging across many different global conflicts. Both sides frame identical outcomes to support their own strategic and domestic political narratives, which is why independent analysis remains essential for accurately understanding what actually happened in reality, rather than relying solely on official statements from either side involved in the exchange. Now let us consider broader strategic implications of such large-scale barrage scenarios beyond combat, because the impact extends far beyond the immediate military exchange between attacking and defending forces. A real-world test of integrated missile defense provides valuable performance data impossible to fully simulate. Every system involved records actual behavior under stress, informing future defense planning and procurement decisions, not only for directly involved countries, but for governments worldwide investing in similar defense technologies. This is why allied nations and defense industry analysts worldwide study such scenarios with deep attention far beyond what typical public reporting captures in headline coverage or simplified media narratives. Real combat performance data, like this, is extremely valuable and difficult to obtain otherwise. Because peacetime testing cannot fully replicate chaos, time, pressure, and uncertainty of actual combat, no simulation can match real-world conditions of large-scale engagements under extreme stress. Whatever the technical outcome becomes, the resulting data will influence future defense investment decisions and shape long-term strategic doctrine well beyond this immediate conflict for many years. Financial and insurance markets also monitor such scenarios extremely closely for broader strategic implications, because impacts extend beyond immediate military exchange into global economic and risk assessment systems. A confirmed large-scale barrage would trigger immediate volatility across multiple interconnected financial markets, including energy markets, defense sector equities, and shipping insurance rates throughout the affected region. Traders and underwriters react quickly, often within hours of confirmed reports emerging from conflict zones, because misjudging escalation risk can carry enormous financial consequences for exposed markets and infrastructure. Watching how fast and widely these reactions spread and persist provides valuable strategic signals, indicating how seriously global markets assess the risk of further escalation following the engagement. There's also a burden-sharing dimension among allied nations worth understanding in such scenarios. Modern missile defense in this region involves coordination and cost-sharing across multiple allied governments, not just unilateral investment from one country, but a shared defensive architecture across partners. A large-scale barrage that reduces interceptor inventories raises immediate questions about replenishment timelines and production capacity across the defense industrial base, supporting these advanced systems globally. It also raises questions about how restocking costs are distributed among allied governments involved. These are not abstract budget issues, but directly impact readiness for potential follow-up attacks. They determine how quickly the coalition can restore full defensive capability after heavy engagement, and shape whether such defense postures remain sustainable if barrages become repeated events. There's also a significant regional ripple effect to consider in this type of scenario. A large-scale barrage does not only test one country's defense capability in isolation, it provides real-world data for Gulf states and regional allies using similar technologies. Or considering investing in missile defense systems for the first time in their history, countries debating procurement decisions now gain actual performance data instead of relying on theory or manufacturer claims that may not fully reflect real combat conditions and system limitations. Now let us consider what happens in the immediate aftermath of such a scenario, because there are three broad paths ahead for both sides, each with different implications. Depending on how intercept performance actually unfolds under real-world combat conditions and pressure, the first path is a demonstrated deterrence success. If the defense response performs at a genuinely high level, successfully intercepting the significant majority of the barrage and protecting critical targets, this outcome likely reinforces the existing strategic calculation that large-scale conventional missile attacks carry enormous cost for relatively limited strategic benefit, given the demonstrated effectiveness of the defending network. This path would likely push Iran's strategic calculus back toward smaller, more limited strikes, or toward continued investment in even larger missile volumes, specifically intended to overwhelm defenses that have just demonstrated genuine effectiveness against the current scale of attack. The second path is a genuinely mixed or ambiguous outcome, where the defense response successfully protects the most critical targets while a meaningful number of less critical missiles get through, creating genuine ambiguity about how to actually characterize the engagement's overall success. This path is, in some ways, the most strategically complicated outcome because it provides genuine talking points for both sides to claim a version of success in their own public messaging, while leaving the actual underlying strategic balance largely unresolved and subject to ongoing debate among military analysts trying to interpret exactly what the engagement actually demonstrated about each side's real capabilities. The third path is a genuine defense underperformance relative to expectations, where a significantly higher proportion of the barrage successfully penetrates the defense network than military planners on the defending side, anticipated based on previous testing and smaller engagements throughout this conflict. This outcome would carry enormous strategic significance well beyond this specific engagement, potentially forcing an urgent and costly reassessment of defense doctrine, procurement, priorities, and strategic assumptions that have underpinned regional security planning for years. This is the outcome every defense planner on the American and Allied side has the strongest possible incentive to avoid. And it's also the scenario most likely to accelerate emergency defense investment and doctrine changes well beyond what a successful or even mixed outcome would trigger. It's worth thinking through what each of these three paths would actually mean for the broader conflict and the wider region beyond the immediate headlines. A demonstrated deterrent success likely reinforces the existing strategic status quo, potentially reducing the near-term likelihood of further large-scale barrage attempts, while Iran reassesses whether continued investment in even larger missile volumes could eventually overcome demonstrated defense effectiveness. A mixed outcome likely prolongs the current pattern of ongoing, unresolved strategic ambiguity, with both sides continuing to invest heavily in their respective capabilities without either achieving a clear, decisive advantage. A genuine defense underperformance would likely trigger the most significant strategic shift of the three outcomes, potentially reshaping not just this specific conflict, but broader global defense investment priorities for years to come, as governments worldwide reassess the real-world reliability of defense technology many have invested enormous resources in without ever seeing it genuinely tested at this scale. Consider how each of these paths would likely unfold over a realistic timeline following the actual engagement, rather than simply as an abstract outcome category. Under a demonstrated deterrent success, the immediate aftermath would likely feature confident public statements from the defending side, muted or reframed messaging from Iran emphasizing the demonstration's political rather than military value, and a subsequent period of reduced large-scale attack activity, even as smaller, more calibrated strikes likely continue. The following weeks would likely bring detailed classified assessments circulating among Allied defense planners, gradually informing future procurement and doctrine decisions well outside public view. Under a mixed outcome, expect a much noisier information environment in the days immediately following the engagement, with competing claims and counterclaims from both sides, extensive independent analyst commentary, attempting to reconcile conflicting official narratives, and a lack of clear consensus about what the engagement actually demonstrated. This ambiguity itself often becomes strategically useful to both sides, since each can selectively emphasize whichever details of the engagement best support their preferred narrative, while the genuinely complicated technical reality gets steadily oversimplified the further the story moves from the original event. Under a genuine defense underperformance, expect a much more serious and rapid internal response from defense planners, even if public messaging initially tries to minimize the apparent severity of the outcome. Emergency reviews of interceptor allocation algorithms, accelerated procurement of additional defense systems, and urgent consultations with allied nations relying on the same defense architecture would likely all occur within a compressed time frame following the engagement, reflecting the genuine strategic urgency created by seeing a core defense assumption fail to hold up under actual combat conditions. None of these three paths is guaranteed, and anyone claiming total certainty about exactly which one would unfold in an actual large-scale engagement is almost certainly overselling their own confidence in a situation that remains genuinely difficult to predict with precision. What we can say is that a scenario of this scale would provide genuinely valuable, hard-to-obtain real-world performance data that would meaningfully inform strategic planning, regardless of which specific outcome actually occurs. Before we get to how this all wraps up, it's worth talking about the specific signals worth watching if a scenario like this actually unfolds, because these are the tells that would help distinguish genuine outcomes from the inevitable competing narratives both sides would push publicly. Watch for independent, third-party technical analysis of the engagement, since analysts without a direct idea stake in either side's preferred narrative tend to provide more reliable assessments of actual intercept performance than official statements from either government involved. Watch defense industry stock movements and procurement announcements in the days following any such engagement, since markets and defense planners tend to respond quickly and honestly to genuine performance data regardless of how either government characterizes the engagement publicly. Watch whether allied nations accelerate or scale back their own missile defense investment decisions in the aftermath, since that response often reveals more about how seriously informed defense planners actually assess the engagement's outcome than any public statement from either side directly involved in the conflict. And watch for any acknowledgement, however subtle, from either side regarding specific systems or interceptor types that underperformed or overperformed relative to expectations, since these details, when they eventually surface, tend to be far more revealing than the broad, simplified narratives each side pushes in the immediate aftermath. There's also a broader human dimension to this story worth taking seriously, because it's easy to reduce a scenario like this down purely to interception percentages, defense architecture, and strategic calculations, and forget what an actual large-scale missile barrage means for the people living directly underneath its flight path. Every missile that successfully penetrates a defense network, however small a percentage of the overall barrage it represents, carries genuine risk to real people and real infrastructure. And the psychological toll of living through this kind of massive coordinated attack, regardless of how effectively the overall defense response performs, represents a genuine human cost that statistics about intercept rates alone can never fully capture. History offers a sobering guide here as well, because large-scale missile exchanges of this kind, wherever and whenever they've occurred throughout modern military history, have rarely produced the kind of clean, decisive, strategic resolution that either side typically hopes for going in. Even engagements widely considered technical successes for the defending side have rarely, on their own, resolved the underlying strategic conflict that led to the exchange in the first place. The most likely outcome of a scenario like this, regardless of the specific intercept performance involved, is not a clean end to the broader conflict, but rather another significant data point informing both sides' ongoing strategic calculations about what comes next. And there's a harder question sitting underneath the dramatic framing that inevitably accompanies a moment like this. A missile defense system succeeding, even at a genuinely high intercept rate, doesn't resolve the underlying conflict that led an adversary to launch that barrage in the first place. Defense, however effective, is fundamentally a reactive strategy, buying time and reducing damage rather than addressing the deeper political and strategic disputes driving the conflict forward. There isn't a clean, comfortable answer sitting at the bottom of this story. Anyone who tells you there is one is probably leaving something important out. What we can say with real confidence is this: modern integrated missile defense represents one of the most technically sophisticated and expensive military investments any government has ever built, specifically around the assumption that a scenario exactly like this one would eventually need to be faced under real combat conditions, rather than simulated testing alone. Whether that investment fully delivers on its promise when genuinely tested at scale remains in many ways one of the most consequential open questions in modern military strategy, one that has enormous implications, well, beyond this specific conflict or these two specific countries. What we do know is this: the technology, the doctrine, and the enormous financial investment behind integrated missile defense have all been building toward exactly this kind of test for years. Whether the actual performance matches the theoretical promise, whether the networked coordination between sensors and interceptors holds up under the genuine chaos and compressed timelines of a real large-scale barrage, and whether the resulting outcome reinforces or undermines years of strategic assumptions on both sides, depends entirely on details that only become clear once a scenario like this is genuinely tested under real combat conditions rather than debated in the abstract. And when that test finally comes, however it actually plays out, it's likely to reshape strategic thinking about missile defense far beyond just this single conflict, for governments and defense planners watching closely from every corner of the world. If this video helped you actually understand what's happening in the world right now instead of just watching it scroll past you, that's exactly why this channel exists. Subscribe. Share this with someone who needs the full picture instead of the 30-second version, and I'll see you in the next one, where we go even deeper into the stories actually shaping our future.